First Works program.
Yay! Evening is for you to see a work in progress. And this is the first time we've done something that I'm calling a case study, where we're going to be watching these wonderful actresses perform a short. So it's interesting that the shootout requires a short film, because I think making a short is a real challenge, just like writing a short story is a real challenge. How do you edit yourself? How do you tell a story in a limited time and be a very succinct task? And so I was going through a lot of the scripts that were submitted, and I came upon Siddhi, which is the film that we're going to be presenting this evening. And it was written by Padmini, who's also going to be directing today's reading. And after the reading, we're going to talk about her process, how the project came to be, where she thinks it's going. But I think that her process is revealing a lot of things that a lot of you filmmakers, be you writer, directors, actresses, are experiencing in terms of how do you develop a project, how do you cast it. And I'm happy to say that she's done an incredible job casting this evening. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce her.
Hi, welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's like amazing to see this space filled, and so just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And at the end, if you want to come up to me, I am kind of shy, so I don't necessarily reach out to people, but don't take that as a I don't want to meet you. Come up to me. I'm happy to talk to you. So I just want to introduce our three beautiful, talented, just amazing women here. Rachel Lynn, who's going to play for Siddhi. So this is a story of two sisters, and I can go into it a little bit more after. But so Rachel is going to be Siddhi, and then Dee Zhu is going to be Mara, and there are two sisters. And then Monisha Shiva is going to read the narration stage directions. So what can I say just very briefly? This is a story of two sisters who are kind of at odds with each other internally, externally, and one who's trying to escape and the other who is very aware of that. So yeah, it comes from a deeper story. It comes from the story of the Buddha, and so it's related to a feature script that I'm working on. And so I wrote this, I started in 2012. I was in Texas at the time, so I started it as a story set in West Texas, and then kind of moved it to India and was kind of trying to figure out who these people were who kept coming to me. And it's really is the story of the Buddha and the story of kind of this desire for enlightenment and this desire to escape at the same time that you're in this world that is everything. So that's kind of the heart of the story. So without further ado, here we go.
Fade in, exterior, train station, morning. The entire film is black and white. Montage. The sun is just beginning to rise. Siddhi stands on the train platform, a small suitcase in hand. Hair in a bun atop her head. She wears a black coat and clutches the suitcase firmly.
Guilt. It's what's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's what feeds me, starves me, emaciates me.
She squats, hands cupped around her face, eats a candy bar, discarding the wrapper in a trash bin. Birds fly by. She purses her lips, a sense of anxiousness clouding her face. Looking out past the train tracks, railroad metal weaving itself together. Interior train later. Siddhi sits on the seat alone. Her suitcase lays on the seat directly across from her. She looks out the window, tracing messages to herself as she watches the sun rise even higher.
I never really know where I'm going, but that's the point, isn't it? I go where I feel like going. I rise, I shine. I arc across the sky, I set.
Blowing on the window, she fogs it up with her breath. Her fingers trace circles, hearts, mandalas in the fading mist.
And somewhere along the path, the journey, I try not to kill myself, try to keep it together. Face forward, shoulders squared, but I think people can tell. I'm almost positive, in fact. I think they all can tell. They're just waiting for me to slit my wrists, convulse, shrivel up and die.
The train stops. Doors open. Mara steps on. She is almost identical to Siddhi, except she has long, black, flowing hair. She wears no coat despite the cold. She is dressed casually, jeans, a black t-shirt. She glances briefly at Siddhi before choosing a seat opposite the aisle. The two exchange perfunctory glances. Siddhi does her best to avoid eye contact.
Do you have a light?
Mara leans forward expectantly. A cigarette dangles in her mouth, seductively, lazily.
You can't smoke on the train.
Well, I won't tell if you don't.
Mara gives Siddhi a coy smile, offering her a cigarette.
I don't smoke.
Mara nods, leans back in her seat.
Too bad for you.
Digging into her pockets, she pulls out matches.
You can't smoke on the train.
You already said that.
Mara lights her cigarette, takes a deep drag, exhales slowly. She stubs the cigarette out on her boot bottom.
One puff. That's all I need in the morning. One puff and it's like I'm on fire for the rest of the day.
Oh, that's fucking great. Really. You should be in an ad, you know? The badass rule breaker, setting a primo example for today's youth.
Wow.
Mara gives her a curious look before turning her head away, trying to ignore Siddhi. Mara gets up and heads to another train cabin. Siddhi continues to stare out the window.
Assholes. They're what's for breakfast. It's why I'm leaving. I can't stand the way people prance through life, acting as if they own it. It makes me want to vomit.
Interior train continuous. Mara walks down the aisle past empty seats. She sits down across from Siddhi. Siddhi notices, irritated, but ignores her.
The entire train is packed. Like every seat's taken. Who knows where all these people are going?
Siddhi shifts uncomfortably in her seat, trying her best to ignore Mara. She angles herself so that she is looking straight out the window as countryside passes them by.
Damn, I could use some coffee. You know, I almost missed the train. I just made it, barely, and now I'm starving.
Siddhi doesn't respond.
So, where are you headed?
Siddhi ignores her. Mara gets up from her seat, crosses the aisle, and sits right next to Siddhi.
Hi.
Siddhi ignores her.
Hello.
Siddhi inches away from her.
Guten Morgen.
Siddhi tries to back up as much as possible, throwing her hands in the air.
Really? Really?
Mara smiles, a reaction finally.
What the fuck are you doing?
Is that any way to speak to a stranger?
A stranger?
Yes, a stranger. Considering all practical purposes, you and I just happen to be two random souls who happen to have intersected paths. Two random particles.
You are a whack job.
No. I am a particle.
Mara sits back in her seat, examining her fingers.
Stalker.
That's not a very nice thing to say.
Mara drops her fingers in her lap, looking up.
I'm merely observant.
You followed me.
Oh, I did not. How was I supposed to know that you'd be on this train?
Maybe because you're a homicidal maniac stalker?
Boy, there's no proof of that. Absolutely no proof. Well, at least no evidence, at least.
Mara looks down, playing with her fingernails. Siddhi gets up and moves to the seat just across the way. Mara slides over, taking the seat that Siddhi had just occupied. Mara looks out the window.
You don't love me.
The world does not revolve around you. Do you realize that?
The only thing I realize is that you're trying to escape. And my only question is, who are you running away from? From yourself?
No, you.
Siddhi, be serious.
Mara leans across the aisle and gently knocks on Siddhi's skull. Siddhi is pissed at being touched, the ultimate violation.
Just Siddhi! Come in, Siddhi!
Mara sits back. She makes the telephone with her hand, speaking in an English accent.
Hello, hello. Oh, yes, actually she is. One moment, please.
Pretending to cover the telephone in a loud whisper with the English accent, she leans forward.
Sit. Sit, darling, it's your mother calling. From her grave. You know, she wants to know why you're running away. And she says for you to get right back home, and tuck yourself back into your life now. No more acting silly, little girl.
She hands the pretend telephone to Siddhi.
Your mom says she wants to talk to you.
Siddhi leans forward. Playing along, she scoops up the telephone, using her own hand now. She continues the telephone play.
Hello, Mum? Mum, you won't believe it. Mara's turned into an absolute fucking crackpot. She follows me, Mum. What's that? Okay, I'll tell her.
Leaning away from the phone, she smiles, covering the telephone with the other hand.
Mara, Mum says for you to get a fucking life. Oh, sorry, what was that, Mum? Ah, okay, you sure?
Covering the phone again as she addresses Mara.
And she says it's quite okay for me to tell you to fuck off.
Back in...
Bye for now, Mum. Love ya. Toodles.
Siddhi leans back, losing the English accent.
You're not following me.
The train comes to a stop. Grabbing her suitcase, Siddhi gets up and exits the train. The doors close behind her. Mara sits, then stands. She walks over to the doors and watches as exterior train station platform continuous. Through the train window, Siddhi storms off, not looking back. Siddhi storms away down the train platform. The train pulls away. Exterior Beach Street, Montauk, afternoon. Siddhi walks down the boardwalk. Her pace quickens, then slows. She wanders one moment, weaving, then walks a straight path, suitcase in hand. Exterior Montauk shore, moments later. In the distance, seagulls float through the air, careening lazily on the thick air currents. Surf pounds against the shore, melting at the sand's edge, receding and washing up in a mesmerizing flow. Exterior Montauk boardwalk, moments later. A finger traces a pattern on the sidewalk using chalk. The chalk breaks. Using the broken chalk, the hand still moves, drawing a murugu, mandala. The camera tilts up to reveal Siddhi, entraced. It tilts down again to reveal an intricate and beautiful pattern evolving. Ice cream drops in the center of the murugu, and the camera tilts up to reveal Mara, aghast that her ice cream has just dropped. She holds the empty waffle cone in her hand.
So sorry, oh my god. Let me fix it.
She leans down, dropping her bag. She tries scraping away the ice cream, which is quickly melting. As she scrapes, the chalk outline smears. Mara's eyes widen as she realizes the irreversible damage she is doing.
Damn you.
Siddhi begins to walk away.
The secrets of the universe. I was so close. It was in the palm of my hand, and you drop a fucking ice cream cone on my mandala?
Siddhi turns and runs, leaving her suitcase.
I was in the zone. Did you know that? Do you realize that?
Siddhi stops and turns to face Mara from a distance.
Do you care? Who are you?
I'm your flesh and blood.
Mara rushes after her, catching up to her, putting her hand on Siddhi's shoulder.
God damn it, stop running away from me.
Siddhi stops dead in her tracks, turns.
You followed me. Again.
Absolutely not. I got off at a different station. Was hungry, looked for food, found food, was eating dessert when you blocked the boardwalk. Yes, as I was enjoying my waffle cone.
She holds out Siddhi's bag, a peace offering. Siddhi refuses to take it. Mara lets the bag drop. The sound of breaking glass. Siddhi winces.
You expect me to believe that? Of all the boardwalks, of all the beaches, you stumble upon mine as I am merely channeling the secrets of the universe. I was so close. It's like you hate me. Is this my punishment for some past life karma?
Oh my God. Stop being so melodramatic. Sid, you don't even believe in that mumbo jumbo, do you?
Siddhi raises an eyebrow. She picks up her bag, clutching it firmly against herself.
This is war.
Whatever, okay? Just don't block any more boardwalks.
She takes a bite of her waffle cone and turns, sauntering off. Siddhi watches in irritated disbelief. She turns and heads off in the opposite direction. Interior train morning. Siddhi sits on the seat alone. Her bags lay on the seat directly across from her. She is dressed exactly the same as last time we saw her. She looks out the window, tracing messages to herself as she watches the sun rises even higher. Interior train morning. The train stops. Doors open. A flash of light. Mara steps on. She is also dressed the same as before. She glances briefly at Siddhi before choosing a seat opposite the aisle, diagonally across from Siddhi. The two exchange perfunctory glances. Siddhi does her best to avoid her eye contact. Mara leans forward, smiling, in a friendly tone as if making conversation with a total stranger.
Do you have a light?
Fade out.
Thank you. Wow. I need to talk to you.
How should we do that?
Do you want to sit by the side for a little while?
Yeah,
And then she, and then we'll join you. So I think the first question I have to ask you is, can you tell us more about the evolution of the story?
In terms of the
How you came up with the idea? Yeah.
So I guess the how did I come up with the idea? I mean, one, I guess I'm somebody who just kind of writes in general. So like I have a lot of stuff where I've like journaled for the day and like starts and then it stops. And so like I said, I was in Texas, and I mean I'm also a producer, I guess. So it's like Texas has tax incentives. So it's like kind of, I think we had like maybe traveled a little bit and had seen Corpus Christi and kind of seen some stuff and knew that they were shooting in Marfa. And so I was kind of thinking about Texas a little bit and just kind of Texas as a backdrop, and had started kind of this idea of these two sisters who are robbers, and there are these like two sisters who are thieves of some sort, and they kind of ride trains. And so I think it was definitely inspired by like this idea of the Old West and this idea of kind of what are they, hobos, you know, homeward bound, somebody who's like always riding this train but is headed home, wherever that is. So they started out as these two sisters who rob houses, essentially, and that was like the original kind of idea with it. And then as I would write more, it felt like they were robbing, but there was something else that was going on, that there was this like spiritual aspect to them. So then I started just doing character exploration, you know, like not trying to write a story, but like, so for one character, who is she? And so that's when like the elements of the two sisters started to come out. So one of them is like of the ocean, and she's like unbounded and she's free, and because she's formless, it causes these problems in her life where she doesn't know how to be a formed person, and so she's always seeking in some way, and so that was Siddhi, and then the other one, like her essence is the earth, and so she comes from this deep dark place where things blossom and where things grow, and so it became then I was like, oh, okay, so there's like something deeper about these two sisters, and so then I started kind of investigating it, and also was like moving more towards the idea of it also kind of being some retelling of the Buddha and the story of enlightenment, which is like the moment that the Buddha is like, before he is about to be enlightened, that this demon Mara comes, and like Mara is like, they're both male in the mythology, but so Mara is kind of just like, has all this stuff that wants to tempt him, you know? And so he doesn't go for it, and he becomes enlightened because that's kind of what he's been looking for. And so I was just kind of thinking about that idea of just women, and how like in, you know, so much of what we know like within film is always this idea of the woman as a temptress, and the woman as kind of like the female body always being a problematic source for so much. And it's all about the male gaze, right? Like all those stories are situating a woman from a male's insecurity or anxiety about a woman. So I was just thinking about like, oh, it would be interesting, like, because Mara really represents the earth, and Mara represents what's here. If in this, like, this is who Mara is the earth, and Sid is like this eternal desire to escape from what is here. So then it turned into, I did like one draft where it was lovers, and that when it moved to India, it moved to like when I was writing like to the Ganges, like the river, and to the river banks as I was writing, and it's the story of like these two lovers who have this eternal kind of fight between them, and then as I kept writing, I was like, they're not lovers, they're still sisters, and that's like it is some escape and some fight, and so it's kind of morphing as it continues, and so now it's like it's getting more shape and it's getting more form. So I had done this. I was part of an alumni screenwriting group, and so had workshopped this script with them, and then started to workshop the first 15 pages of the feature, and then was like, it's not working, even though I was getting good feedback from them. And so I just wrote the first 5 pages of the new one, where they're the two sisters kind of meeting up in India together. And that one is based on kind of like the death of a parent, and kind of them on a spiritual voyage together. And so it's evolving. It's totally different from the way it started, is where it's moving. Yeah, so that's the evolution.
I noticed that you've notated your script.
Mm-hmm.
Has it continued to evolve as you did your rehearsals?
So, I mean, these are like notations in terms of like what characters want or what their motivation is and stuff like that, but the actual script itself hasn't changed. But I had told Lorna, like, so I've workshopped this twice. So Monisha workshopped it with me with Padmini, they were the actresses in my first script, and so we workshopped it last year, and then Dee and Rachel workshopped it a couple of weeks ago. We've done it twice. And so I was saying, like, during our rehearsal, like, they did these amazing improvs, and I was just, like, sitting there, and I was just like, oh, this is amazing, like, I don't even need this. Like, they've, like, got it. They've, like, taken it to some place where, like, you know, they can take the heart of this and just go with whatever they want. And it's like, I'm sitting there entranced by it, and, like, also this is a very angry script, you know, and when they did the improvs, like, it was, like, really, like, kind of heartwarming and really beautiful, and like I feel like you guys brought out this element to the sisters where you understood, like within the improv, like Mara's kind of concern for her sister, and Sid's like anger, but in a way that was really delicate and really gentle. And so I think like for me, like my process also is trying to figure out, because you can write forever, I think, and like be like obsessed with this idea of like whoever I get, they're gonna read the exact lines that I wrote because I'm brilliant and I'm a genius. And it's like, well, okay, that's fine. And it really works for some actors and some directors, but also I think for some people it's like, I want to collaborate. Like I want to be able to create something with you. And like, so I felt like when we were doing the rehearsals, for me it was a moment of like, yeah, that's what I want. Like that's the direction I want to go, is to start with something, but not to assume that like that's where it's going to end. That whoever else comes into the process is part of the process with it. Yeah.
I find that very inspirational, because I know I've worked with a number of writers who are in love with their work and try to get people to conform without realizing, especially through workshops and other opportunities, to realize that it is amorphous. It should be, and it should change. And either you can reject choices that your actors make, or else you can see how you can embrace that and change the writing, or not change your voice, but perhaps develop it on a different level. And that seems to be what your process has been.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a choice. I think that ultimately you have to figure out what your own aesthetic is, and that like some people really like, they're in love with their stuff because it really works, you know, and like that sometimes is true. But if that's not, you know, for some people that doesn't work. Like you want some other part of the process. And for me, like it feels more and more like that. But like, because I am a control freak, you know, like that doesn't mean I'm not a control freak. Like I do want to write everything and like want stuff to still be very specific. But then I also want to be able to like throw it out the window too, and like see what happens. So yeah, I don't think it makes me any less controlled as a person to be like, this is mine, and I want it to still end up in a specific way. But I think, I don't know, I'm still evolving, so, and I want to be on a journey with people. I want to be on a train with people. I don't want to like look around and be like, oh, there's no one here but me. That would suck. So yeah.
Has your sense of the look of the film evolved through this process?
Yeah, so Monisha, we went last year and kind of did like a black and white photo shoot together, and which was great just to see it in black and white. And then Hightow, who's not here, who's a DP, we then went to Pennsylvania and like looked at trains from the 1800s and did some shooting with that. And so things have started to change, because with this, like it started out on like the Long Island Railroad, and then I was in Pennsylvania and was like, oh, I love 1800s steam trains, and how would that change? And that's like a ripple effect, because if you change a major character, which is a train, then how does it change everything within it? How does it change the visual aesthetic? How does it change the way characters dress? Like, it does change things, but it's still evolving.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I know that you went through the database. As many of you know, the Film Lab has an extensive directory of actors, and we encourage all of our screenwriters to access it. And tell me about going through that process.
Initially, I was really bummed out because I was like, hey, there's only 2 Indians on here. What's up with the representation? And I was excited because Monisha was on there, but I was like, I don't have any choices for casting Indians unless I like go outside of like, you know, the Film Lab. And then I was like, wait, I started looking because I knew Dee, because we had like overlapped in a workshop together, and I was like, oh, so I like started looking at people's reels and resumes, and it was very eye-opening, because I think, you know, the danger is that as people of color, like what's really successful is for me to be like, oh, I'm Indian, so I'm going to tell a story about Indians because that's what I know really well. Or I'm going to tell a story about being confused in the diaspora because that's what I know really well, because that's how I've been marketed. And those, like, if you look at contemporary fiction that comes from like different ethnic groups, it's always about their confusion and their struggle, you know? And it's like, well, you know, what's interesting about that is if you look at the larger scope of stuff, if you look at Hollywood or white filmmakers, they feel very entitled to cast whoever they want. and they don't know anything about these stories or these characters, but they're like, I'm gonna cast an Asian because that's gonna fit this idea. And it's like, that's your idea that you're casting, that's your world that you're creating. And so for me, looking on the Film Lab website was this moment where I was like, I can cast whoever I